Molly was the only child in the family, as her parents always said, very long awaited. The girl had been raving about medicine since she was little. From the age of 5 she kept telling everyone that she would definitely become a doctor. It was not surprising, because in the family for several generations have all been hereditary doctors. Molly's parents were considered excellent specialists, known far beyond their city. Richard, Molly's father, saved countless people by performing unique surgeries. Mom was an oculist, with many years of experience. Molly was considered the darling of almost all the teachers at school. Modest, moderately sociable student, always tried to get only good marks, she was interested in everything. Molly read a lot and signed up for numerous additional circles. Every day the schoolgirl was scheduled in minutes. Parents were surprised at their daughter's eagerness to learn about the world, but they were only happy about it. After graduating from high school with top marks, Molly immediately and without any problems entered the medical faculty on her own. Where else could a girl from a family where all her life her first priority was caring for people and wanting to help them enter? When the time came to choose a specialty, Molly, not knowing why, chose pediatrics. After graduation, her parents' acquaintances immediately offered her to go under their wing to the best fee-paying hospitals in the city. But the girl decided that in addition to theory, it was necessary to gain experience and practice, and went to one of the state clinics as a doctor. Mom lamented that her daughter exchanged work in good clinics, walks in the apartments, not always trustworthy citizens. The father, on the other hand, praised his daughter for the right decision and was completely on her side. She can still work for a good salary, let her see how we started out. And it was not unnecessary for us to have that experience, said wise Richard, and kissed his wife. This is exactly how it worked out in Molly's life. Having worked for a long time in a state institution, by the age of 35 she had transferred to a good private clinic. She could not refuse the offer of a family friend, although the staff at her previous place of work was very upset and did not want to let the wonderful district doctor go. Work in the new clinic gave only positive emotions because the patients were young residents of the city. Children loved Dr. Molly very much and gladly went to her appointments. Little patients who had been in her office at least once, seeing the next time even accidentally in the clinic halls, shouted, Dr. Molly, and I am no longer sick. You cured me. At such moments Molly was the happiest person. But happiness at work did not outgrow happiness in her personal life. She met her husband, Alex, on vacation. At the age of 25, Molly received a trip to the sea for her good work as a young, promising specialist. Alex had been sent away from his job for exactly the same reason, having been a fine engineer. It was not to say that they had some kind of crazy love. Simply by meeting each other, they decided they enjoyed being together and decided to get married. Molly's parents didn't want to hear anything about their only daughter's quiet marriage registration, so they threw a fancy banquet in one of the best restaurants in town. At the wedding, it was as if the best doctors of the city gathered for another corporate party. Only a few people were from the young husband's work, and the rest of the guests were exclusively medical professionals. The event was noisy and fun, and the young people were happy to accept congratulations and gifts. After they were married, Molly dreamed of a child, but nothing worked for the couple all the following years of their life together. At first it seemed like everything was perfect, and they loved each other. They went with her husband to the theater or cinema, sometimes on weekends they just went out into the countryside. But then more and more often Alex had reasons to stay late after work or to go somewhere on his day off. All the facts suggested that her husband had a mistress, but, as they say, not a thief is not caught. And to watch or to look for any evidence of adultery was below the dignity of Molly. Sometimes it seemed to her that they sometimes lived as neighbors. Her husband came home when Molly was asleep and lay down on the couch in the next room. In the morning he would have breakfast and leave again. That was how they lived, as if they were a close-knit family. The only joy was still her work. When she came to her little patients, she forgot about everything and lived only to communicate with them. The staff and parents of sick children simply adored the smart and kind Molly. She always knew with whom, how and what to talk about, what prescription to write. No diagnosis was made incorrectly, and the treatment prescribed by her led to recovery in due time. One day, during an appointment, a little girl came into her office. She did not look more than 8 years old. Despite the cold and dank autumn, the girl was wearing a perfectly light jacket, almost worn slippers and patched, obviously child's hand pants. Molly was embarrassed, not even by the appearance of the patient who entered, but by the fact that she came alone, without her parents. Next came a nurse from the reception, saying, "Molly, I'm sorry," she snuck out without anyone noticing, "I didn't even have time to stop. She is small, you cannot even see her from behind the counter." She tried to take the little girl by the hand to lead her out of the office. But Molly came up to the girl and squatted down and asked, "Hello, my doll. Do you have something that hurts? Show me where, so I can help you." But the girl looked like a hunted animal, her eyes filled with tears. She looked back at the nurse every minute, frightened, and Molly realized that the little girl would not say anything in front of her. The doctor looked at her and asked the girl to leave. As soon as the door closed behind her, the little girl pulled a crumpled up piece of paper from her jacket pocket, on which a child's hand had written a request for help for her mother. Molly did not understand why the child had chosen her office and how she could help this unknown woman. She only realized that it was useless to ask her any questions. She absolutely did not say anything or did not want to talk. Molly, not yet knowing how, decided to help the girl. She poured tea, put cookies on the table and said, "Sit down, my dear, I'll quickly go to my uncle's supervisor and you and I will go help your mommy." Molly asked the supervisor to leave and, taking the girl by the hand, asked to show her where her mother was. The little girl somehow even happily grabbed Molly's hand and dragged her out of the clinic. Everyone who saw the couple in a hurry only looked at them in amazement. They walked for a very long time, to the very outskirts of the city. If the girl had been able to talk and told her address right away, they might have taken a transport. But it was completely unknown how long they had to walk. When Molly could no longer feel her feet at all, the girl silently poked at an old, crooked wooden barrack. The woman could not even imagine that in such huts can still live. But the girl, struggling to open the door of one of the entryways, stepped into a dark hallway. It was indeed a terrible sight. The railing was wobbly, the steps, and those were, every other time. The little girl tugged at the woman's hand, clearly wanting to lead her to her desired destination. When the girl opened one of the rooms in the long, dark hallway, letting the doctor through, the woman saw an exact replica of herself on the bed against the wall, only slightly older. The difference was no more than 10 years, but the resemblance could be determined without any DNA. The room mistress, apparently due to illness, was very pale and emaciated. When she saw them enter, the woman on the bed, in a barely audible voice, muttered, "Well, we have met, little sister. I did not expect to see you." Molly was so embarrassed that she could not even answer. She just stood there silently watching her sister's face. Killy, that was the woman's name, invited Molly to sit down and, pausing because she was very weak, began to tell the story of their lives. The girl's mother raised them alone. The girl's father was imprisoned before the youngest was born. The woman worked day and night so that her daughters did not need anything. She sold fish in an outdoor tent and stood outside for 10 hours at any time of the year, regardless of the weather conditions. Apparently, this hellish work undermined the woman's health, and when the youngest of the daughters was only a year and a half old, she was hospitalized. From there, the mother never returned home. Of course, no one explained the reasons for her death to the children, but at the time Killy believed that her uncle, who was in charge of the treatment, was to blame. When their mother agreed to the surgery, she asked the young surgeon not to abandon her daughters. He jokingly told her at the time, "Well, honey, you're going to babysit mine. Everything will be fine." But it was not the doctor's fault that the woman's organism could not endure the operation and she had a heart attack. Richard did the operation and he felt it his duty to bring up the girls, who were left orphans. But if the younger of the sisters still had little understanding, the older one immediately took it with a negative attitude. She decided for herself that it was he who killed her mother, and she insisted that it was better to go to an orphanage than to a murderer. That is how the sisters' lives turned out. One was brought up in a strong family and love, and the other, with no relatives, lived in an orphanage. She, of course, dreamed of a better life, but she never tried to meet her sister, even knowing where she lived. After leaving the walls of the orphanage, Killy went to work. She needed something to live on. The girl got a job as a clerk in a local store, where she also met her future husband. After she fell head over heels in love with her boyfriend, she learned that Jason was a criminal mastermind. She hoped that the birth of her first child would change her husband, but almost immediately after Nicole's birth, he was imprisoned again. 6 months after the verdict was pronounced and her husband was sent to a place not so distant, Killy became very ill and fell ill. Fearing for her daughter's future, she decided to look for her sister. Shortly before her illness, she saw an article in the local newspaper where the front page was Molly's photo and an article about the best children's doctor, one of the private clinics. Killy immediately recognized her sister in the photo, but at that moment she was not ready to communicate. The woman kept the article, and it turns out not in vain. Not knowing how long she had left, fearing the worst, death, she decided to take care of Nicole's future. Knowing that her sister did not work far away, she sent her daughter a note. Molly cried, afraid to even lift her eyes to her sister. After all, while she lived in a family where her parents were ready to fulfill her every wish, her own sister was suffering in an orphanage. Then, when Molly, making excellent money, could afford to buy a nice apartment and travel at least once a year or two to the sea, Killy lived in an almost collapsed barrack. Her sister and daughter sometimes did not even have enough money for bread, and Nicole, it turns out, was not from birth dumb. The girl was frightened when a yard dog attacked her. Molly came to her sister's bed and, hugging her tightly, she wept. She could not believe that now she had a soulmate, or rather two, because Nicole was her niece. After meeting her sister, the woman changed a lot in her life. She divorced her husband, which he did not even resist. She sold her large two-room apartment and bought two one-room apartments in the suburbs, in adjacent entrances, for herself and her sister. Billy turned out to have a quite curable illness. Molly pulled all the strings and, investing the money left over from the sale of the apartment, got her back on her feet. A good doctor was found for her beloved niece, and she quickly began to chirp, literally without a word. Molly, adoring her little smart niece, was ready to do anything so that the little girl would not need anything. Her parents, learning about what happened, begged them to forgive them for their silence, believing that they should have told her in all the years that she was not their own. But Molly understood that, if it were not for them, perhaps she would not have made a good doctor. Killy did not want to meet them for a long time, but as the years passed, realizing that Richard was not to blame for anything, she agreed. Now every weekend the parents began to look forward to their daughters and granddaughter setting the table with their favorite apple pies.